As retired and active police officers, we all know that you can buy gear from a lot of different places, especially online. But I want to remind you of the importance of supporting companies that support law enforcement. And I don't know a company that fits the bill more than Goals at goals.com. Their motto is proud to serve those who serve, which they do every single day. And they walk the talk by supporting dozens of focused organizations like Gold Shields. So when you're looking for gear, support our premier sponsor and go to goals.com. And for all our loyal listeners out there of the show, use the promo code GOLD15 for 15% off your next purchase until December 31st. That's right, all the way to the end of the year. Go to goals.com today.
Welcome to Gold Shields. Join NYPD veterans Tom Smith and Dan Murphy. With over 50 years of combined experience chasing drug lords, dismantling cartels, and hunting terrorists. Now they pull back the curtain, sharing raw, unfiltered stories from the front lines and the heroes who stood beside them. No topics off limits. This is real. This is true crime. This is Gold Shields.
Hey, welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. We don't do too many Saturday shows. This is throwing the schedule into a loop, but I love it.
Great stories, no schedule. We tell them when we were lucky enough to get a guest like we have today, which is a big privilege, we will tape it at 3:00 in the morning just to have somebody like this tell their story. So why don't you tell us a little bit quick? I know you want to go, Tom, and start the interview, but we want to always say thank you to our sponsors up front because we really appreciate them.
Oh, well, absolutely. We don't have a good portion of the show isn't without our sponsors. Our premier sponsor, goals.com. Make sure you go check them out, support them, go buy their stuff. They're the best in the business. And the best thing about Goals is they always have our back, law enforcement, first responders, everyone out there. They supply all the equipment in the world to them, and they're outstanding. So just make sure you go to goals.com. Use our promo code, which they gave us that we can give to you, Gold15, get 15% off all your products, all your purchases. That was a nice gift they gave us to give to all our listeners. So make sure you go there, and tacticalgear.com is the same, Gold15. Use that there as well. And they're a big part of us, Dan.
Without a doubt, they're a tremendous company, and we appreciate their support as well as all our listeners. Without you guys, we'd just be two guys with microphones, and without Ovette, our producer, we'd be two guys with microphones that didn't work.
And we'd have no artwork without our graphic designer, Taylor. So
That's right. That's right.
that just shows you where me and you are on the pecking order of this show.
Yeah. The talent, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. At the bottom, way at the bottom.
That's why Ovette was so great with, listen, just do the show, and I got it from there.
Thank the Lord for him. He's so good at what he does. He makes us look real. And, we appreciate him. Thank you, Ovette.
No doubt. You know what? We're going to dive right into this. And I want to just preference it with, the war on terror didn't start on 9/11. It didn't at all. The precursors to 9/11 were so profound. Obviously, none of us knew what was going on beforehand, what was going to come with the 98 bombings in Africa and the embassy bombings there. And then what we're going to talk about today, the USS Cole bombing in Yemen. And we are so honored to have Kirk Lippold on today, who is the commander of the USS Cole at the time of that bombing. And Kurt, sir, it is an absolute honor to have you on Gold Shield, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, both Tom and Dan. I really appreciate it, and it's a true honor. I mean, anytime I get the opportunity to share the story of my heroes who truly saved our ship and shipmates, I will take that opportunity, and I really appreciate doing it, especially for a law enforcement podcast, given that there were some unique things that went on with respect to Cole that I'm sure we'll get into.
Yep, we cover law enforcement, military, just great stories is what we try to highlight with people who have done things that are noteworthy and stories that need to be shared. And so we really appreciate that that's your perspective on today's discussion. So we could talk for a long time about your career and what brought you to that point that you were commanding the USS Cole that was docked in the port of Aden. And so please take us to that day if you don't mind. I hope you don't mind. There's a lot to unwrap with that. So let's go to that day.
Okay. I'm going to take one quick step back and say USS Cole is an Aegis guided missile destroyer homeported in Norfolk. We left out of there in August as part of the George Washington Battle Group. We were a late deployer, so we deployed 6 weeks after the carrier, across the Atlantic, through the Mediterranean, went through the Suez Canal on the 9th of October, down the Red Sea through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. And early the morning of the 12th of October, we were scheduled to pull in for what was called a brief stop for fuel. We were below 50%, which is very unusual. So we were going to be taking on a little over 250,000 gallons of fuel. We expected a refueling rate of 300 to 500 gallons a minute. So for us, the sooner we can get in, get hooked up, take gas, get back out there and back out to sea, the safer we were going to feel. So early that morning, we arrived off the port. Typical Navy. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, just like you guys. And so we were around there around 7. We actually didn't get to enter the port till around 8:30, and we tied the ship up at a pier out in the middle in Aden Harbor by around 9:30 that morning. Shut down the 4 main engines that powered the 2 shafts, left 2 of our 3 gas turbine generators, 2,500 kilowatts each running, began the import refueling checklist, and started going through. I mean, like everything that all of us do, it is a checklist. It is done for the safety of personnel. It is done for the safety of equipment. And as we went through that entire checklist, we found out that we're actually doing things exactly the way we're supposed to. The chief engineer came up, signed off on it as part of routine harbor operations. The supply officer came up, and we contracted for 3 garbage barges to come out to the ship. That would be telling later on, to take off trash, plastic, and hazmat that we can't dump at sea. And then my executive officer came up and informed me that when we started refueling around 10:30 that morning, we opened up the valve on the pier on the ship. The Yemeni fuel workers opened up the valve. The initial refueling rate coming on the ship that morning was not that 300 to 500 gallons a minute that we were expecting. The initial rate actually coming on board Cole was 2,500 gallons per minute. It was coming on so fast that we were overpressurizing the fuel tanks, had to tighten the valve down and bring that rate down to 2,000 gallons a minute. And at that rate, though, it took our timeline from what we thought was going to be that 6 to 8 hours and collapsed it down to 2 to 2.5. We were ready to feed the noon meal of chicken fajitas. The XO went and made the announcement, and I was sitting at my desk that morning doing routine paperwork when the world changed.
Well, the world certainly changed. Before I get to the actual event and what happened and the impact that it made on this world, and you're so right with saying the world changed. What was pulling into Yemen, which at that time was a hotbed and a beginning of a hotbed with terrorism, but in the United States, Al-Qaeda was very, very new. It was something that was mentioned, and Bin Laden was mentioned, and, uh, John Miller interviewed him, and it was, kind of a thing going on. What was the read or threat streams that were going on your ship with entering such a hostile area before the blast?
Well, when we pulled in that morning, unfortunately, we didn't have like a high secure space for highly classified information or communications. We had just the normal stuff. And that morning we pulled in, the highest classification message I had related to terrorism was classified secret, no foreign, which means no foreign dissemination. Well, both of you have worked, especially on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. You understand secret classification is maybe a day at most ahead of the New York Times and the Washington Post. And so consequently, we did not have some of the sensitive intel. Now, if you take a look and take a step back, for example, in my career, terrorism has been part of our nation's military fabric for a long time, and we were willing to tolerate it. In fact, my first deployment was on a tank landing ship supporting the Marines off Beirut in 1983. I was in the embassy exchanging funds for a tour downtown with the Marines just a few days before they blew the face off the embassy, killing 17 Americans. Then, of course, you had World Trade Center 1 in 93. You had the Kobar Towers in 96, the embassy bombings in 98, and here we are in 2000 with Cole. So the threat stream coming to us, we had an elevated force protection posture, or what we call threat conditions back then. We were operating under what was called Bravo, which means there was an elevated risk to them, but we had absolutely no specific or credible information. What I didn't know at the time and was recently brought out in a 3-part documentary by Big Media and Daily Wire Plus, it's in streaming on Daily Wire Plus right now, is that out of the interviews done by law enforcement post embassy bombings in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and Nairobi, Kenya, they had captured an Al-Qaeda operative, and he told them Al-Qaeda is planning a terrorist attack against Navy ships in Aden, Yemen. That was fed into the intel system, and nothing was done. We never got word of that, and we pulled in essentially blind that morning.
Looking for powerful defense without the mess? Meet Impact, a revolutionary line of chemical irritants designed for law enforcement, military, and personal protection. With no blowback, no cross-contamination, and easy cleanup, Carry Impact delivers unmatched stopping power without the hassle. Whether you're in the field or on the street, safety should never be compromised. Protect yourself with the next generation of defense. Carry Impact, stopping power redefined. Have you ever wished you could go back in time and see the events that shape the true crime cases that fascinate you? With newspapers.com, it's like having a time machine to the past. Dive into more than 1 billion newspaper pages from 1690 to 2025 and relive the headlines that shocked entire towns. Explore newspapers from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond with a simple search. Read the breaking news as it happened, crime scene reports, witness testimonies, and courtroom drama. Explore forgotten clues and see how the media shaped the narrative of infamous cases. But it's not just the major stories. Newspapers.com lets you dig into local mysteries, missing persons reports, and the small-town scandals that history forgot. It's the closest you can get to being there when it all unfolded. So, if you're ready to dig deeper into the crimes that keep you up at night, start your journey today at newspapers.com. Use the code GoldShields for an exclusive 20% discount on your subscription.
That's something I hadn't heard before. And that's stunning. That's a stunning failure of the system.
Absolutely. I'll be honest, when they did the documentary, it wasn't until it aired that I found that out myself. And
Wow.
I was kind of watching the premiere in downtown DC just a couple weeks ago, and was just it rocked my world, because up until that point, it's kind of been one of those, hey, Captain, what did you fail to do? And here we are looking at the intel world, because let's face it, when it comes right down to it, you have to look at every one of those force protection measures, whether you're in the military or whether you're in law enforcement. And for every single one of those, the leadership has an obligation to ask the question, okay, what are the procedures that we need to follow? What is the training we need to give our people? What is the equipment that we need to provide them with? What are the rules of engagement that allow those measures to be implemented? But at the end of the day, what drives a force protection posture? It is the intel picture. And if you have an incomplete or a non-existent intel picture with specific and credible threat vectors, then you're walking into any situation blind.
Wow. So you're doing paperwork that morning. What was the total count of sailors and any other support staff you may have had on ship that morning?
That day we pulled in with 293 ship's company and one what we call a PACE instructor, which is a program for a float college education. We like to give the opportunity for the crew to get college credits while they're underway in their spare time. We had one civilian PACE instructor on board. So that was the complement that morning. And we were pretty good on manning. I mean, one of the unique things I had done prior to deployment is back then I was the first CO that was going to deploy with women on board. And I kind of looked around and said, hey, we're undermanned in a number of areas. So starting about 4 months before deployment, we rearranged some of our berthing compartments. And then I went to the Navy's Bureau personnel and said, hey, you've got women ashore that want to come to a Navy ship. I've got a Navy ship that I've rearranged to take more women. Why can't I have the higher manning levels that I'd really like to have prior to deploying? And I knew what we were capable of. And, you could have as many or few people as possible. But when it comes to war fighting, you don't know how many might be injured or killed in a combat action. And so the more depth you have in training, you're going to do that. And so we ended up deploying with about 50% more women than any standard destroyer. So I had, I think, 43 that morning instead of the normal complement of 36. So there was a big difference in that I had that depth. And one of the things I also did is any good CEO is going to do is that during the past year, I'd set the standard and bar for performance for my crew. And every time they'd get close to it, I raised it. And I kept pushing them and pushing them and pushing them because I looked at it as, look, I've been given a gift and I need to make sure that they're capable of sailing into harm's way, surviving and winning and being able to bring folks home. And at the end of the day, when it's kind of a unique thing that I'll brag about for the crew, when we got underway from Norfolk, Virginia, and pulled away from the pier, USS Cole achieved something that had never been done before in the Navy and has never been repeated since, in that all my officers manned the rail, waving goodbye to their loved ones down on the pier. A 100% qualified enlisted crew got that ship underway for deployment, and it paid dividends when we were hit and almost 20% of the crew was killed and injured. People could show up at their general quarters station, folks would be missing, and they had the confidence, not only from a technical standpoint, but a leadership standpoint to step into those vacant positions and do what was necessary to save the ship and our shipmates.
That is the definition of leadership, that's for sure. And we talk about that on our show constantly. And you just proved that point. So, Kirk, it's October 12th, 2000 in the morning. You're at your desk. Take it from there, how the world changed.
Well, I'm doing what all of us love to do in a normal day job. I've got that never-ending stack of paperwork in front of me, and I'm grinding through it. When at 11:18 in the morning, there was a thunderous explosion. You could feel all 505 feet and 8,400 tons of guided missile destroyer suddenly and violently thrust up and to the right toward the pier. We seemed to rotate, settle back down in the water. I mean, the bulkheads were wavering. The ship was bowing and flexing. Power failed. Lights went out. Ceiling tiles popped out. I literally came up on the balls of my feet, grabbing the underside of my desk in the brace position as everything popped up on my desk and slammed back down. When the ship stopped moving, I went to the door of my cabin. I looked down the passageway that ran from the wardroom where the officers eat to the other side on the starboard side where my cabin is. This gray cloud comes around the corner and then it silently washes over. I could smell the dust. I could smell the fuel, but there was this acrid metallic tang in the air. I couldn't describe what it was. Young officer stepped out from his stateroom right behind my cabin, grabs the door jamb, looks at me wide-eyed and using good sailor-like language, asked me, what the F was that? And then without saying another word, takes off into that gray cloud to find out what's going on, thinking like everyone else in that moment we'd had a fuel explosion. I took one step to follow him and stopped because I knew we had been attacked. If it had been a fuel explosion on the ship or the pier, we would have been blown out into the harbor, but we've been thrust up toward the pier. The only thing on the left side of the ship is open harbor water, so instinctively I knew something had come alongside and exploded. I went back into my cabin, unlocked the safe where I kept the keys to all the weapon systems on the ship. I don't grab keys. Instead, I brought a personal weapon with me on deployment, 6-hour P229 9mm, loaded it, chambered around, decocked it, grabbed 2 clips of ammunition, went down to the middle of the ship, looked back toward the flight deck area. The watch team that used to be there observing the fuel workers on the pier, gone. The wooden podium that they used to write the deck log on, blown into pieces and is scattered across the deck. Wires that used to form a high-frequency radio antenna snapped off and dirty black waters dripping off of everything. I don't know if we're going to be boarded, whether there's going to be a follow-on attack. All I know is I need to get to the port side and find out what's going on. And all I could think to myself as I took that deep breath and said, well, this might be your destiny, but guess what? You're going to go down fighting for your ship. And if you see someone that doesn't belong, make them duck first and don't leave an empty round in the chamber. And that's where I took that breath, headed out toward the port side. And the first person I see is my chief gunner's mate. He's responding with the security teams to reestablish the defensive perimeter around the ship. He's already got on his flak vest helmet, M14. And we walked over to the port side, leaned over the ship, and it confirmed my worst fears. All the metal is shoved inward. The spray pattern of explosive residue is on the side of the ship. Lifelines have been blown away, and as I glanced up and down the left side of the ship, everything that was metal or plastic or fiberglass was either blown clean off or crumpled in from the force of the explosion. But as I also glanced down the left side of the ship, there are 4 orange rafts alongside USS Cole. 1 sunk in the blast area, 2 more deflated lying alongside the ship, and 1 back by the flight deck that's fully inflated. And the first thing I thought was, how did someone get these rafts alongside the ship? First one blew up. Next 2 got peppered with shrapnel and the detonators locked loose. But that one by the flight deck, if it goes off, is instantly going to take out the 2 screws that propel the ship, the 2 rudders that steer it. Shortly after that, one of the security team members came running up as the crew is coming out, and we're having to shove them back inside because of security concerns. And he said, Captain, those rafts aren't the problem. Look. And what had happened is the 2 garbage barges that had come out as part of that 3 garbage person team had loaded up trash, plastic, and hazmat, had gone across the harbor to dump the trash. 1 boat was on the way back, but another boat looking exactly like the garbage barges came by the bow, came down the side of the ship. 2 guys were in it, stood and looked up. A young fireman, Mooney, who was what we call the overboard discharge watch to make sure we don't spill fuel. As the boat went by, thought, something's not right. Next thing he knew, he was flat on his back with a face full of shrapnel. What we'd experienced was a waterborne improvised explosive device that had gone off, that had blown our life rafts out of their containers, and that's what those orange life rafts were. Later on, when Fireman Mooney, who would survive, was interviewed by the FBI and NCIS at Portsmouth Naval Hospital, as the boat had gone by, all he had thought to himself was, boy, that sure is awful clean for a garbage barge. That was the only indicator we had that they had built the explosives into the boat. Quick jump ahead. We didn't know that 11 months before, or 9 months before us, they had attempted an attack at another Navy ship, USS the Sullivans, at that same pier, but the boat had foundered and sunk, and they had recovered the boat, the trailer, the car, the explosives. They tested them in the desert. They rebuilt the boat and built the explosives into the boat and covered it with red carpet, and that's what was blowing all over the top side of the ship. So at this point in time, I knew we had suffered what we'd never trained for, never experienced and no intel on, a waterborne improvised explosive device. Went to the bridge at that point, contacted the Yemeni port authorities and said, freeze all harbor movements because we didn't know where the attack had come from, notify local hospitals and send boats out to get the wounded off the ship. So at that point, things are really starting to move, but we're also in trouble because USS Cole at this point is listing over 5.5 degrees to port and down 1 degree by the bow.
And taking in water, among other things. Mm-hmm.
Huge. We knew we were flooding. We just didn't know if we were going to be able to save the ship at that particular moment.
Wow. Let's talk about your people that were lost that morning. What was the number and the number of injured?
Well, ultimately, as a testament to the crew, we were able to get the ship stable within an hour. That first day, we evacuated 33 wounded off the ship in 99 minutes. And of those 33, 32 had survived. So all that training that we invested in CPR now paid off. I mean, they were doing an absolutely phenomenal job because one other thing that a little kind of an unknown fact is that when the explosion occurred, it knocked our announcing system offline. The backup system also failed. So no one could tell the crew what had happened, where to go, or what to do. They fell back on their training, went to their general quarter station, And as I mentioned, if they showed up and people were missing, they stepped up. They took on greater responsibility and roles. They took on leadership roles. And that's what they actually did to save that ship. I mean, when I came down off of the bridge headed toward the central control station, which is co-located with Damage Control Center, it's like the nerve center for the engineering plant. When I first walked out and I see all the wounded, they're all the way down the passageway at the back end of the ship. The back 1/3 of the ship had lights on, which was good news because we knew we had a generator running, which means we could get power to pumps and save the ship. There 2 to 3 sailors were working on every one of the wounded. Wounds were typical for a blast like this: broken bones, shrapnel, cuts, scrapes, bruises, and shock. As the captain, I would have given anything, anything to bend down and talk to my wounded sailors. But I can't because they're not my number one priority. If we can't save the ship, nothing else is going to matter. So I had to step amongst the wounded, focus my efforts, walked into the central control station, took a look at the engineer and what she's doing to find out the status of the generator and how many pumps we have operating and spare power. To my right, the executive officer working with a young ensign who'd only been aboard the ship 2 weeks, doing exactly what they planned, trying to figure out where's the primary damage, what is the secondary damage, and what are we doing to control the flooding. At that point, I got to make the best decision to buy command tour. I kept my mouth shut. The last thing I needed to do would be to take charge. And so instead, I just stood there for about a minute. Then I said, Chief Engineer, XO and Neutral already briefed me. Of the 4 main engineering spaces on the ship, 2 had flooded, 2 had not flooded. We were already working. Crews were already down there. The crew was, I mean, it was just magnificent. The communication coming in, talking, telling what to do, the damage control assistant telling people to go out. Once we knew we weren't going to lose the ship because we'd only lost 2 of the 4 spaces, I went back up to the middle of the ship. There's my chief hospital corpsman and his medical team already working to triage and prioritize the wounded. More bad news, the 3rd person in a row to be evacuated is my senior chief gas turbine technician. He is the senior most enlisted in engineering, head of my damage control training team. His wife is also my ship's ombudsman, so I think I might lose that connection. But he lifted his head up and looked over at me, and I walked over, and I knelt down, and he reached up and grabbed my hand and said, Captain, I don't think I'm going to make it. And I looked down at him and said, Senior Chief, I don't want to hear that. I want you to think of your wife, Lisa, and those 2 blonde-haired kids of yours who want to see their daddy again. Ultimately, he would have been the last chief evacuated out of the chief's mess. When they got to him, he was perfectly calm, pinned in by debris, and says, hey, don't worry about me, but be careful. I think there's body parts around here. The rescue teams don't say a word. They just bend down, get the debris off of him. When they get down to him, it's not body parts. It's compound fracture to his right leg that's folded up and across his chest with his boot near his ear. So they grabbed his leg, straightened it out. We gave him a shot of morphine, started an IV, and he would be one of those 32 that would survive when we evacuated him off the ship. Absolutely phenomenal job.
Unbelievable.
I mean,
Unbelievable.
so the crew just, they reacted. I mean, this is why they are the true heroes in this event, because they showed up at a moment in time without any idea of what had happened, very quickly assessed what they needed to do, and just did it. Every single one of them took charge. I mean, my XO at the back of the ship when it was hit, he didn't know if I was alive or dead. So what did he do? He took over and made decisions as if he was the captain until he saw me, and without one word being spoken between us, stepped back in that role. That's the confidence that he had in what we were doing. That's the teamwork that we had aboard the ship. Absolutely phenomenal.
Well, that's the U.S. military at its best. That's for sure. Training is so important, and mission ready for anything to happen. That's an incredible account of those events. My God. Uh, so the recovery of the 17 sailors who lost their lives, how did that go in the middle of everything you're explaining and trying to get to them? Because I know a number of them were trapped. Uh, how does that work with everything you just described going on at the same time?
Well, that first day, we would have 4 identified as killed that we would put in body bags down on the pier. One sailor, as I mentioned, was the one that even if we had gotten him to a trauma center, later on, the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology at Dover Air Force Base, who receives all the remains, he would not have survived. His internal injuries were so severe because he was so close to the impact point of the explosion that he would pass away that late that evening, despite a French medical team that had flown into country to help us working on him. And so there were 12 trapped in the wreckage. What would happen that day is an hour after the blast, I would make my first voice report off the ship, notifying Fifth Fleet that we had been attacked by terrorists. And when that would immediately then kick off a message called a critic message, a critical incident report message that notified the world. Immediately, State Department deployed what's called a FEST, a Foreign Emergency Support Team. You have, you name it in the government, and they were practically on board. Other three-letter agencies, FBI, NCIS, they all began to flow into country. The FBI and NCIS team really walked on board Saturday morning. And as they walked around, when they got the first report that a Navy ship had been attacked and they'd blown a hole in the side. Okay, I talked to the head of the FBI explosives, the on-scene commander for the explosives lab when he showed up, and he thought, yeah, about a 1-foot hole. We're going to go there, do a little cleanup, and no big deal, collect some evidence. And when he arrived and he saw the top of that curve, which you see in a lot of pictures, that only shows about 25% of the blast hole. And he goes, that appears to be a little bigger. And then I walked him around the ship. And at that point, we had 12 sailors that were tracked in the wreckage of the mess line, the galley area, and main engine room number 1. And as he walked around and we finally ended up in the galley area, which was utter devastation. It was the epicenter of the explosion. He would later tell me that all he could think to himself was, how can I possibly convey to Washington just how big this explosion was and how much work we had ahead of us? Now, as you heard me mention before we hopped on air, let's face it, when law enforcement shows up at a crime scene, which is what this was, it was an international terrorist crime. It was pre 9/11. It wasn't considered an act of war. As a matter of fact, the Clinton administration did not want to even consider this an act of war. That would create too many legal problems for them. So what ended up happening is they had to try and figure out now, okay, when we show up at a crime scene, it's normally isolated, and we're there to do two things: evidence collection and recovery of any remains that might be there. That mission would change because I have a living, breathing Navy ship. I'm not going to put the crew up in a hotel, turn it over to law enforcement and say, hey, see you in 3-4 days when you finish getting everything into your nice bags and on the 302s for evidence collection. We're going to be on a living, breathing platform here. And my crew became part of the team that would actually help with some of the evidence collection, so that as they would gather stuff up, they would sit there and say, yeah, ship, bomber, belt, boat, ship, another piece of bomber. And so that's how we became part of that. But the FBI and NCIS, to their credit, totally shifted the mindset in order to recover those 12 sailors trapped in the wreckage. 3 FBI agents that I will always be grateful to: Tom O'Connor, John Adams, and Kevin Finnerty. They're the ones that put on the hard work in 105-degree temperature, put on the Tyvek suits, the mask, the filters, the gloves, taped up, went in, and they did the recovery, which didn't start for 5 days after that, because we almost lost the ship when our only operating generator quit Saturday night going into Sunday morning, and it was 22 hours till we got it restarted early Monday morning. So when they came aboard Monday, we would literally spend the next 3 days prying them out of the middle of the mess line, the galley area, down by the entrance to main engine room number 1. But we would also have mobile diving salvage unit 2 that would go in through a ventilation shaft into the top of main engine room number 1 and recover the sailors that had been working down in that engineering space as well. So that really just totally consumed our time. Evidence collection was going on in the background, and it would continue throughout virtually the entire time that we were in port.
So you have all this stuff going on. You've got the evidence collection. You've got the FBI comes in. They do interviews of everyone. They have to put everyone on record. It's just what they do, um, and that's a good thing. But you're also trying to keep the ship afloat. You're trying to keep it uh, so you're not losing it to this bombing. How do you begin to do any sort of stabilization of that whole area, the area with a hole, the impact zone, while they're gathering evidence and doing their job?
Well, we had done a couple things prior to pulling into port. One of the things that proved to be very critical is number one, Arleigh Burke class destroyers like USS Cole are extremely well designed. But we have what's called the damage control deck. It is the first continuous deck that literally runs from the bow to the stern. And that deck, everything below it, we had compartmentalized it as if we were at general quarters. That had two effects. When the blast went off, number one, it spreaded it contained the amount of flooding or how quickly spaces were flooding so that we could control it. And number two, it mitigated the force of the blast as it was, that fireball traveling at 25,000 feet per second. It literally mitigated how quickly and where it spread. So that compartmentalization really helped. So that helped contain the damage area to the two main areas, main engine room number one, auxiliary machinery room number two. And while we had flooding forward into auxiliary machinery room number one and back into main two, all that was contained very quickly. So we were able to basically keep that area of the ship stabilized and make sure that we weren't going to lose it. There was concern, like I said, when we lost the generator Saturday night, but God love sailor ingenuity. At one point with the generator not working, the pumps that we had they did not have enough power to go down to the bottom of main engine room number two and pull the flood waters out as the ship was flooding. So what did the sailors do? They said, well, what if we take a pump down lower into the engine room? They did that. And then they said, Captain, we need to cut a hole in the side of the ship in order to put the exhaust out. And I was like, okay, but do me a favor. Don't measure once. Don't measure twice. Measure 3 times. And please make sure when you start that cut, it's about a foot above the water line. And we actually cut a hole in the side of the ship for the exhaust, got the pump running, and that's how we stabilized the floodwaters going into main two. So all this is going on. And in conjunction with that, on Monday morning, we've got the ship. It's stable now. We're pretty confident we're going to hold it. We're doing the recoveries. We're collecting evidence. Oh, then the Navy rolls in also and says, yeah, now we're going to begin the investigation into the actions of the commanding officer and the crew to find out what they didn't do and whether anything was right or wrong. So that's going on in the background as well. So yeah, a lot of balls to juggle, but guess what? I was privileged enough to say the 3 greatest words of a naval officer's career. I relieve you. And when you do that, you become the one accountable officer. And you can, you will, you must, and you do whatever it takes for your crew and your ship, period.
Can we put that on t-shirts and we can sell them? Oh my God.
Absolutely.
I mean, y- you can't say it any better. I want to ask you, in an interview I saw you on, a 3-star admiral comes on the ship and has a pretty interesting conversation with you, and you have even a better conversation back about your ship and your crew. Tell us that little story.
So the day after the blast, Vice Admiral Willie Moore, who is the 5th Fleet commander, came aboard with the ambassador, and I walked him around the ship. And then 9 days later, after we had recovered the last of those sailors out of the wreckage, he came back aboard, talked to the crew, did some reenlistments. Really a good talk for the crew, really good pep talk. But then he looks at me and says, Captain, I need a few minutes to talk with you. And as I like to put it, okay, let's see. 3-star Admiral, Navy Commander. Yes, sir, right this way. And so we went up and sat down one-on-one up on the starboard side of the ship near the middle where the blast area was on the other side. And he said, look, Kirk, your crew has done a phenomenal job. They saved their ship once. They saved their ship twice when you almost lost the generator. but they're having a very difficult time with what's happened. They have had to do honors departure ceremony for your 12 shipmates as they've carried them off the ship. There's a lot of pressure building back in Washington, on Capitol Hill, in the Pentagon, and with the families to get this crew home as soon as possible. Now, you've got a lot of people supporting you. I would like you to consider keeping who you need to allow half or more of your crew to go home. And I'm sitting there staring down at the deck in disbelief because I've got a 3-star admiral carrying the water from Washington that is asking me to allow half or more of my crew to abandon ship and go home to the security of their families because this is hard. And I knew I was the one lone guy out there on the thin ice. He could fire me in an instant. But I will never forget looking back up at the Admiral and saying, Admiral, I couldn't disagree with you more. This crew saved their ship. This crew saved their shipmates. And this crew, as a crew, will get USS Cole out of port onto the heavy lift ship Blue Marlin, and then we will go home together. The Admiral and I then got to trade places, and he's now the one out there on the thin ice, knowing what the pressure is back in Washington. And to his credit, with the long view of history looking over us, and that flag that hangs in Memorial Hall at the Naval Academy that says, "Don't give up the ship." And he says, "Okay, you got it." But as we walked back to the flight deck, what was unbeknownst to me that his staff had already told the crew that the Admiral was there that day to announce that half or more of them were going to get to go home. So when the Admiral got to the back of the ship, pressed permission to leave the ship and walked off, the whole crew knew that I was keeping them aboard. Many of them wanted to stay, but some of them also felt like, hey, we've done everything and the ship is now secure. We're not going to sink. Our shipmates have been taken care of and we've seen them off. We need to go home. And at the end of the day, I will give Admiral Moore credit because he did make the hard decision, kind of counter to Washington, to say, you want to know something? We've got a captain here and a crew that are doing phenomenal things in the finest traditions of the Navy, and they deserve the honor and privilege of taking their ship and getting it headed back home as a crew. And we did that.
Wow. You know, when you speak for others, sometimes the leadership role, a heavy lie is the crown, so to speak. It's not easy, but you are upholding the standards of the United States Navy. You're upholding your ethos. You are being what you should be at that moment, which is a leader. And you know, with the long, like you said, the long view of history, 10, 20, 30 years later, those sailors would look back, and if they didn't have the opportunity to go home together as one group, there'd be a lot of regret. There would be a lot of feelings of, I abandoned. Tom and I can speak to being at 9/11 at the World Trade Center. And I can tell you, and I know Tom feels this way, and virtually everybody else we did too, we worked with too. If somebody came to me and said, you know what, you've been here for 2 days, it's a lot, go take a week off, I wouldn't have. There's no way you do that in the middle of a crisis when your job is to be the crisis guy. You just don't do it.
You don't.
So I respect what you did and said. It must not have been easy to have to look up to a 3-star admiral and tell him. But I'm also very happy to hear that he understood that. He was put in a tough position.
It's what I've kind of evolved in my view of that word that we all use called integrity. Now, you ask a lot of people and they say, well, integrity, that's easy. It's doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason, even if no one is looking. And I'll say, no, that's ethics. If you want a good definition of integrity, it is making the right moral and ethical decision, regardless of the consequences.
Patriot is a premium whiskey hard seltzer. We've carefully crafted 4 flavors that not only taste exceptional, but can be enjoyed on any occasion, anytime. We're committed to giving back 5% of all profits to the core groups we call the backbone of America. We are proud to help those who serve our great country. This is America's Seltzer, the brand that stands for quality, community, and the American spirit.
When it comes to the safety of law enforcement, first responders, and military personnel, Every moment counts, especially in the dark. Streamlight provides the reliable, high-performance lighting solutions that these heroes trust in the most dangerous situations, whether it's a car stop, navigating dark alleyways, or exploring abandoned buildings. With Streamlight by their side, our heroes can tackle challenges with confidence, knowing they have the power of advanced lighting technology to guide them. From the first responders on the front lines to the law enforcement officers ensuring our safety, Streamlight is there to make every mission a little easier and much safer. Join us in supporting those who protect us. Visit Streamlight.com to discover how you can be part of the team keeping our heroes safe. Because when they shine, we all shine.
You know what the best part of this show is? Just to reflect a second before I get to my next statement for you. Dan and I never get the whole story of our episodes. We never do. We do it intentionally. We hear, we get guests because of the event that they're talking about, but we do make it an absolute point of not hearing the entire story for moments like this. When Dan and I were involved with JTTF and 9/11 and all that, I personally didn't know 90% of what you just talked about. Yeah, not at all. I mean, what went into saving the ship and keeping it afloat and the recovery and all that, even being involved in that world after 9/11, I had no idea about 90% of what you just talked about. And that's why we love doing this show and having people like you on, because it needs to be reminded all the time to this country and people who say A, B, and C about this country and what the military is and so forth. And then to hear stories like this, they need to hear this over and over and over again. That's how important it is.
And we knew people that responded to the call. We know people that from our task force that were there, that worked their party investigation. We knew the basic story of it, but these are the kind of things, like Tom said, you don't hear. And these are the kind of things where, leaders and basically everybody gets pushed during a crisis. This is a serious, significant crisis. Even in a life filled with handling crises as a naval commander, as a police detective, whatever it is, this is one of those historic moments. And you got pushed in so many different ways. You got stretched. Your leadership skills, your analytical skills, your management, everything gets pushed to the max. And so to have that thrown at you, meanwhile, the Navy is flying people in to come and investigate you to see whether you did something wrong, which is always a joy,
Well, it's as I like to put it, in that single moment at 11:18 in the morning, I got the ultimate gift of command. As everything that I thought was important in my life that was on my desk and surrounding me became irrelevant. And I only had to focus on two things to the exclusion of everything else, including family. What do I have to do to save my ship? What do I have to do to save my crew? Nothing else mattered.
Wow.
And that's the focus you should have had, and you did have it. And that's leadership. That's accepting the mantle of the responsibility you've been given, embracing it, and then pushing yourself beyond the limits of anything you've ever been in before. You were never in a situation like that before. And, God willing, never will be close to again. But at that moment is when you learn just how much grit you have and just how much you meant the oaths you took and the words we throw around. Like you said, we throw around words like integrity. What does that really mean? It's easy when it's easy, but when it's not, that's when you grow as a person.
So, Kurt, less than, you have this and you eventually get out of Aden and Yemen. And then less than a year later, 9/11 happens with the same group, with the same, focus on taking us out. What's your 9/11 story of that day, where you were? And then did you have an immediate flashback to your attack when 9/11 happened?
Well, again, I'll take one quick step back because when I had change of command on Cole, It was in March of 2001. I went to the Joint Forces Staff College, a little time to decompress, catch my breath. Uh, with all my fellow classmates, had a perfect record in softball of 0 and 10. Um, we were more interested in getting to the beer at the end than we were in actually playing softball. Too many chances to get injured and have a pulled hamstring. But when I graduated from that, I reported to the Joint Staff in July, and a former commanding officer, I had been his executive officer on a guided missile cruiser out of San Diego, had since retired and was working up at the CIA for a guy who is a legend in that world, Charlie Allen, who is the assistant director for collections. And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, we'd love to, Mr. Allen would love to host you up here. We'd like to share with you what we knew about bin Laden before, during, and after the attack." So we fenced around some dates, got a little morning off. I was working in the J5, the strategy and policy director for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I drove up, I talked to the nice camera, I talked to the nice armed guard after the lift gates came down, and they were kind enough to give me a pass to the old headquarters building. So I walked into the old headquarters building, and as I walk in, it was just like a movie theater. On the floor is the granite seal of the CIA. To my left is the one single gold star for the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor. To the right is the Wall of Honor with all those gold stars there for those that have sacrificed their lives for our nation, serving in the CIA, some named, most not. And then I went upstairs and we sat down and got a briefing for an hour and a half with Mr. Allen, guys that was science and technology there, some other folks. And at the end, he said, Mr. Allen said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Sir, I'm going to be honest with you. First, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk with me. But I'll be honest, America doesn't understand. I believe that it is going to take a seminal event, probably in this country, where hundreds, if not thousands, die before Americans realize we're at war with this guy," meaning bin Laden. And he said, "Well, we're doing our best to make sure that doesn't happen." So at that point, we took a break. John wanted to show me some overhead imagery they had of faint places that we now know with, for those of us that kind of touch that world, Tarnac Farms, the training camps, and some of the other areas. 20 minutes after I said that, the first plane hit the North Tower. It was the morning of 9/11. I was literally standing in the outer office to go meet Cofer Black, who was the head of the Counterterrorism Center, when we watched the second plane hit the South Tower and blow out the other side. And at that point, I think everyone knew we were at war. And we got a phone call, said, "Mr. Allen wants you back in his office right now." We walked back up there. He refused to have an office on the 7th floor. He wanted to be low key. It was on the 6th floor. So we walk in, he shoot everyone out of his office, walked up, puts his arm around me and says, "I can't believe you said that this morning." And I said, "Well, I guess it's something I've known about for 11 months, but unfortunately the country's going to find out about the hard way. Looks like we're going to have a long day ahead of us. I better get out of here and back down to the Pentagon." So at that point, left the building, driving down the Pentagon, talking to my then girlfriend, now wife. And as I'm headed out there, I'm an absolute mess. 17 sailors died on my watch. Now my nation is under attack. There should have been something I should have done. But right before you get to the Pentagon, there's a stone arch I drove through, and she said, "The Pentagon's been attacked." And then I saw the top of the black cloud from where the plane had gone in by the heliport into the side of the Pentagon. And she said it was like a wall came down. I said, "Yep, Pentagon's been hit. Call my parents and tell them I'm okay. I'm going in to see what I can do. I'll call you later this afternoon." Click. So what I did was drive up onto 395, which is the main artery headed south out of Washington, D.C., parked there. Arlington Police, Virginia State Highway Patrol, they both showed up and said, "You can't stay here. You got to leave." Told them who I was and why I was staying there. They said, "Okay, you can stay." And that's how literally I would stop parents that were going into the Pentagon because the daycare center was attached there and get them calmed down because all the kids had been safely evacuated to the park across the street. I said, "We don't need any more people getting hit by cars. So if you're calm, you can go get your kid. But until you calm down, I'm not going to let you go." And then we stopped buses and we were evacuating, and all these people are coming out of Washington, D.C. But in the midst of all of this, 2 times big black Suburbans with lights flashing would fly by us. And all of a sudden I'd get the slamming of the brakes, the squealing of the tires, the smoke curling up. They'd back up, roll the window down. It was FBI agents responding out of headquarters and the Washington field office. And they're like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Hey, what do you think I'm doing? I'm trying to help out as best I can." They say, "Can't you ever get away from these guys?" They said, "Hey, as long as they keep missing, I'm happy."
Mm.
So that's, it's just on 9/11 full circle. A lot of the agents that I was working with on Cole in Aden responded to the Pentagon attack and saw me out there. And even today, it's unbelievable.
Unreal. Unreal. I mean, yeah, sometimes we're at a loss for words.
Well, look, we're all in a business where we train, hope, and pray that the worst doesn't happen. And when it does, that's what we're trained to do. That's what each of us have done during our careers, during our lives. And we may be retired, but we'd be prepared to do it again in a heartbeat. Give
That's
me a
right.
chance to get him out there. Okay.
Absolutely.
I'll let the young bucks maybe lead the way, but I'm going to be a good follow-up.
Absolutely. We all say that. We've said that numerous times on the show. I'd do it again tomorrow in a minute.
You put me on a destroyer in the South China Sea and I'll harass the Chinese to no end.
I love it. I
That's
love it.
awesome.
Well, you're an incredible storyteller. You are a living piece of history. The things that you have been involved in and engaged in are something. These stories need to be told. And thank you. I can't thank you enough. We could speak with you for hours and hours, but I really do want our audience to know how they can learn more about you, your experiences, how to get in touch with you, where they might see you speak, what events you might be involved in. Please take an opportunity now. Let our audience, who's probably like I am doing right now, wanting to hear more from you, how can they do that?
Well, biggest thing is after the event, and while it took me 10 years to finally be willing to relive it onto paper, I did write a book. It's called Front Burner: Al-Qaeda's Attack on the USS Cole. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of those places. You can get that online. And then, of course, Daily Wire and Big Media, they put together the 3-part documentary that is now streaming on Daily Wire. So you can go watch that if you subscribe to it. And so that's a great opportunity to really learn. And like I said, even in my case, I learned some facts about some of the intel shortfalls and failures that led up to us being in that port that morning to begin with, that were never taken into account by either the Navy or the Department of Defense. So there's really a lot more out there. Speaking engagements, really, when I retired, I after 26 years in the business, what do the vast majority of my shipmates do? They go to work in the defense industry. And I begrudge no one, but I decided I did not want to do business development for any of them. I said I need to strike out on a new path. So if you do that in life, you get 2 choices. What have you done before that you love so much you want to do again? Or what do you want to go learn about in life that if you could, you would? Get a teaching certificate, real estate license, law degree, you name it. And I had been teaching up at our command course for 4.5 years, 5 times a year, having that blunt, honest conversation with those new commanding officers and executive officers going out to command, and basically telling them, look, when you take command, you better be ready. I had benefit of 15 months before we got hit to get to know my ship and crew. You might have 15 hours. You need to be ready before day one, so that when you walk on board, your mindset is geared and that you immediately set the bar and the standards for your crew to live up to and perform to. So, I decided to get into the world. So what I do now is I'm an exclusive speaker with Kepler Speakers out of Arlington, Virginia. Most of what I do are leadership speeches, but I also do a safety speech. And the reason why is after we got hit, you don't have time for safety briefings. And for the next 17 days while we were in port, we didn't have one reportable safety incident, despite all that rendered metal, live electrical wires, fluids going everywhere, so, and the last one I do is national security presentations, where I really talk about here's the state of the world today and how it may impact your industry or your business. So that's really the ways that people can get a hold of me is, book me as a speaker, go read my book, which really gives you the detail and the background, or watch the documentary that just came out.
Well, we will be blasting all of that out when we put this show out. And you are, my friend, the definition of a leader. Under what the circumstances that you dealt with, the pressures you had, as Dan explained, to come out of it the way you did and saving that ship and other members and other sailors on that ship, and then continuing to serve this country and make it safer and make sure we're all okay is a testament to you. And we can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on our show, Kirk. It was an eye opener. It was one of the most dramatic stories I think we've had. Just the storytelling of it, piece by piece, was something I'm not going to forget when we look back on these shows that we've done. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. It's for me, thank you for the honor of being able to tell the story of my crew, the heroes, but also the sacrifice of those 17 families, especially when we're having this show in the shadow of the 25th anniversary just a couple weekends ago.
That's right. Wow. 25 years. It seems like yesterday in so many ways, doesn't it? I'm sure it does for you too. But again, we say thank you. We can't thank you enough. But it's funny, in crises, people learn a lot about themselves, right? And sometimes you learn when it comes to being a leader in a crisis, you learn maybe after and on reflection. But it seems like you had learned those lessons and instilled them and ingrained them in yourself before the crisis. That's the point you're making. Before the poop hits the fan, you better be ready for that poop to hit the fan, not just setting up training and everything, but in your head and in your heart, so that you stay true to your guiding principles. My guiding principle is save my ship, save my people. Everything else goes out the window. You had that in your head so firmly, just like your team, you insisted they train so much. Everybody responds to their training. You had the mental training to know that this is my priority. And that's what leadership is. So it's been an honor to hear your story. And I tell you, if you're out there right now and you have an event that you're looking for a speaker, I'm sitting here looking face to face with this gentleman, and I can tell you, I would pay to sit and listen to him. He is so knowledgeable and such a good speaker and so articulate. You'd be crazy not to have him motivating corporate teams, motivating law enforcement, whoever it is. I'm telling you, Kirk, you know better than me. You have an audience in our audience. I can't wait to hear the feedback when we put this show out, because you held us in the palm of your hands, and I'm soaking it all in and learning so much today. So thank you for that, sir.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it very much.
Well, this time more than ever, like we do on every show, pray for our law enforcement officers, pray for our military vets. You just got a firsthand account of what they go through and what they can go through in an instant. And the courage and patriotism and heroism that they go through was right up front today. So please keep them all in your prayers. You see them in the store, say hi, pat them on the back, say thank you. That's the least we can do for them and their families. Keep them all in your prayers, please. For an incredible, absolute, unforgettable guest, Kirk Lippold, and my partner, Dan Murphy. This is Tom Smith for Gold Shields. No one go anywhere. We got overtime coming up with that's going to be some conversation with me and Dan. But everyone out there, please stay safe. Continue to support us on TheGoldShieldShow.com, YouTube.com/@GoldShields, and all our other social media spots. We love the feedback and we love you being in our corner. Thank you so much. Stay safe, everyone. We'll see everybody soon.
As promised, we're back with the OT, the overtime. Cops love overtime, don't they, Tom? What else do they love?
They love incredibly intense stories. That's for
Unbelievable.
sure. That
Yeah.
was, listen, when me and you stare at each other on the screen, that's something. And that's what we did probably 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, easy. Don't know what to
Wow.
say. I'm blown away by what the guest is saying. I'm so impressed with this individual. I have so much respect for Kirk. Oh my gosh. Where do you even start?
No.
And if you made it this far in the episode and you listen to it, I'm sure as the audience, you're feeling the same way we are. This is a special person. This is a man who understands leadership innately. It's in his bones. And he was put to the test on October 12th, 2000 in the port of Aden in Yemen on the USS Cole. And he took his responsibilities more than to heart, and he lived them out. And what an incredible example it is for anybody who wants to learn about what real leadership is, right?
Oh my God. And you know what? Here's the thing about it. And I was thinking of this. Towards the end of the show, I'm thinking about our overtime segment and what to say. And what I came up with was you see him on our screen and how articulate and calm he is. And you know that's exactly how he was that day.
That's right.
There's no difference between him walking around the coal that day, as he explained, and the demeanor he had sitting in front of us. Not a bit.
And he and his team and his crew, and he's so proud of them. And you can tell he deeply feels the loss of everyone who was lost that day. They trained the way that you're supposed to train, which is again and again and again and again. When it comes to life safety stuff, when it comes to security, warfare stuff, police stuff, you have to train relentlessly. When you train relentlessly, it becomes a muscle that doesn't need to be thought about at that moment. You just respond. And that's what happened with his team. And the respect he has for his team came out when he told those stories of how they all immediately did what they were supposed to do. When they saw a gap, they filled it. They were cross-trained. They were aware of each other. They were aware of the importance of the moment. Nobody's complaining. They're just doing what they're supposed to do at a top level, despite being incredibly emotional at that moment as a human being would be.
Yeah.
The fear, the uncertainty. You put that aside, you do your job, and that's a testament to the leader. That starts with the leader.
No doubt. And I think one of the most compelling stories he told about on that same line, Dan, that you just said, was the actions of his XO.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
knowing if the captain's dead, where he is, and just doing his job. And then
Right.
seeing him alive going, okay, now it's yours. But taking over the responsibilities that he has as an XO and where he was on that ship and just doing his job, like you said, trained. And dude, how many times did me and you went to a training? We're like, ugh, what time we getting out of here? What time's lunch? What are we doing? We know what we're doing. All wrong, and thankfully there was a lot of good training that we got that instinctively kicked in bad situations, but training's so important.
He talked about first aid training. He saw them doing CPR and first aid and triaging and using the tools that they had at their disposal. That's not the kind of stuff you blow off, and a lot of people do, sadly. I know in policing, we didn't take it all that seriously. Like, EMS will come. Well, let me tell you something. You better take it seriously because somebody's life is hanging in the balance. If you can't get an ambulance there, you can't get an EMT. Same thing on a ship. They have to be self-sufficient. They have to take care of that themselves. There isn't a crew that's going to come and do that. It's you.
Right.
And his team knew that. And there are 32 of the 33 that were transported to the local hospital that survived. That's a testament to initial first aid, triaging, and emergency response capabilities of his team. And that comes from the top. It all flows down. He's an amazing man, Kirk. I really am blown away by him.
Yeah, I mean, that was as an impressive an interview as we've had. And you think about it, not downplaying 17, but that could have been so much more.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
much more.
Yep.
Than 17 lives that were lost that day. It could have been, even more because of what his leadership showed his crew to do. They saved them. But you know what? And I was right. I was truthful, man. 90% of what he said, I never heard. Never heard. Because you think about it, see, we're so drawn into the post 9/11 world of information and news and 24-hour. Back then, it wasn't a thing. I remember distinctly the chief of detectives, won't say his name, at the time when the Cole got hit, said, what the hell do I give a crap about a ship that blew up on the other side of the world? And look.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was. Oh, it's not going to happen to us. That happens over there. It's not going to happen to us.
That's
That was
also
a big mindset.
That's also the guy that forgot who we were when we were in his office to get an
Absolutely.
award.
And why we were there.
Amazing. Amazing. You can't make it up. I mean, he meant well, and Mr. Magoo. But,
Yes.
you know, he started out this conversation. One of the things he made a point of is he doesn't just take invitations to go talk about what happened to the USS Cole. History reflects the basics of what happened. He wants to tell a story of his crew. He wants to talk about leadership, professionalism, and he wants to talk about what he felt and what he saw his people do because he's so proud of them.
Right.
He takes a message from that event that is a positive one despite the tragedy. And he reflects that. And so that's why right here now, we're not talking about what happened that day. We're not talking about the people that did it. We're talking about him and his crew. And that's what he wants us to talk about. And that's fantastic. I just love that.
Absolutely right. It's just that was some show. That was some interview.
Yeah.
I mean, and man, we're lucky.
We really are. We really
Man,
are.
we're lucky.
We keep finding and being able to secure opportunities to speak to people who are incredible, inspiring. This gentleman is inspiring. If you're only listening to us and you're not seeing it on YouTube, take a quick peek at it. You'll see a gentleman completely calm, completely in control, and firm in who he is and what values he has.
Yeah.
He talks about morals and ethics and integrity and honor. He talks about these things and he lived them. He didn't just talk about them. They're not stump speeches. And he's following in the greatest tradition of our U.S. military when it comes to that. So what an honor. It was an honor to speak to him.
That's what it was. Tell us about another honor of our sponsor for
We're
overtime.
honored to
Dan.
have sponsoring our OT is Fairline Services, fairlineservices.com for any security needs you or your organization may have, whether it be armed, unarmed, plain clothes, executive protection, threat assessment, risk assessments, whatever it is that you may think you need security-wise, give them a shout. Look them up, fairlineservices.com, upper Midwest U.S. base, but national in reach. Phenomenal, phenomenal services. I believe in them. And check them out, fairlineservices.com. You'll be happy you did.
Absolutely. You got people's backs, man. They're pros, absolute pros. And happy to have them on here. Hey, everyone. Thank you again. Quick, just kind of a list of things, TheGoldShieldShow.com, JustAskJan.com. Get our merchandise there, and you can also get them on our website. Just go up to the drop down for apparel, and it links you right into Jan's website that has all our merchandise. Cold weather's here. Let's go. Get the hoodies, get the long sleeve shirts, get all that good stuff.
I got 2 hats and a T-shirt the other day from her, and I love JUS Ask Jan. Leave off the T for T-shirts or whatever you want to leave it off. Thunderbird.
For all that good stuff. But, and our YouTube channel, audios, Instagram, all that stuff. Thank you for everyone out there for what you do for us and keep this going. And we just try to provide the best guests and stories we can for you. So thank you so much for being in our corner as we continue this crazy, crazy journey we're on.
It's been a blast.
Dan, have a great day.
You too. I'm going to go watch some football. Remember, if you can't be an athlete, at least be an athletic supporter.
Amen. Everyone stay safe out there. See you soon.
Talk to you soon.